So welcome everyone to this evening's Coach Education webinar series. It's our third of the series, and we're going to focus tonight on pre-season, the return to pitch. As you see in the screen in front of you, we have a plethora of Coach Education webinar series over the last number of weeks, and a few more after Christmas again. So this is the last of this series before Christmas. We've already done team building on and off the pitch. We've already done creating a positive coaching environment as well. So they're actually available on our LGFA YouTube channel. So if you missed those over the last number of weeks, you're more welcome just to click on the LGFA YouTube channel, just type in the actual title of the webinar, or even just go into the development section and you'll come across those. And as you see, after Christmas, we have a load more webinars coming up. So we're looking forward to those and joining in again with you after Christmas. So my name is William Harmon. I'm National Ladies Football Development Officer. With my remit is specifically Coach Education. I'm joined tonight by our special guest, Cliona O'Connor. Cliona is a full-time coach, is a coach developer with the LGFA, also is a Gaelic for Teens ambassador with us. She does an awful lot of work around athletic development with LGFA. She also is involved with the Dublin Senior Hurlers, along with other intercounty teams over the last number of years. So we're welcome Cliona here tonight to focus on the topic pre-season, the return to pitch. So before I hand you over to Cliona, just a few things. If you have any questions throughout the webinar, just throw them into the chat function. I'll log them and I'll pose them to Cliona throughout the session. But on that note, I'll just pass you over to Cliona, and we hope you enjoyed the webinar.
Thanks, Will. And thanks everyone for logging on. Looking forward to this one, and actually reading, I hadn't seen all the webinars together until William sent me that slide, the list of them. So there's some really good stuff, and I specifically will be tuning into the how to coach on the sideline in January. I think that's a good one for sure. But tonight it's all about pre-season, and from my point of view, this is where my busy time is pre-season in terms of athletic development and strength and conditioning and getting teams ready for in-season training. So to be clear about it, pre-season is usually the first block of training when you come back after break, after Christmas break or whatever. It's usually Christmas break, and before the matches start, before competition starts. So it's before the in-season work, getting people ready for competition basically. So tonight we're going to talk about some principles around pre-season and do's and don'ts and suggestions and what a really good pre-season might look like, but then also a lot of practical things about, well, what would those activities look like on the pitch? Because it's very hard. I can't put a template up here and say this is exactly what you should do in your pre-season training, because everyone's teams are different. You're all coaching different age groups. Some of you already sent in questions during the week, so there's a big spread of requirements for teams in pre-season. And maybe if you've been really worked on your fitness in the last 2 seasons, this one you're kind of starting from 2 steps ahead of another group. So it's very hard to be prescriptive in terms of what you can do, but we can definitely talk about key principles. So we'll get cracking on that now. So the first point is always, what are we preparing for? What are we trying to get ready for? And you will have seen this in other LGFA workshops, this idea of 4 quadrants. So the demands of our game, you've got the tactical, the technical, the physical, and the psychosocial. So tactical, game awareness, using the width of the pitch, where you take your shots from, shot selection, how you move the ball, all that type of stuff. Technical, your solo, kick pass, hand pass. Physical, then your physical fitness, speed, agility, endurance, and then the psychosocial. And I think in many ways the glue that holds it all together. So from a team sports point of view, you're talking about commitment, motivation, communication, all of that stuff around the actual engagement of players between each other, interplayer engagement, players and coaches, and all that sort of stuff. So in relation to pre-season training, and I've highlighted, see the physical quadrant is in a different shade of blue there, because often pre-season we think only about the physical, and pre-season training is important from a physical preparation point of view, but we miss an opportunity if we only think about that. At no point in the season should you be only working on one of these quadrants, in my opinion, that our pre-season should include all of them for sure, but there is a little shift towards the physical in terms of just getting them ready and up to the pitch of competition, whatever level you're at. So I want you to think about now for a second, or let's think about what are the physical demands of the game. What are the main priorities in other areas and how can I build them in? And how much time per week do I have and how will I spend it? So just give yourself 30 seconds there and think about those. So physical demands of the game, what age group are you at? Are you under 14, under 16? Are you adult? Think of the type of things that they have to do on the pitch, because that's what you're preparing for. You're preparing for 60 minutes of intermittent running. So stop, start running, speed, agility, jumping, landing, all of that stuff. So that's what they've got to do. And the tactical, the technical, and the communication and the psychosocial, all of that stuff as well. But from a physical perspective, that's what you're preparing for. But I would tell you or suggest or recommend that you also think about what are the other priorities. So from a tactical point of view, if there was one tactical thing that you could teach your team, or maybe two, from a technical point of view, are there one or two skills that you think, geez, if I could really improve this, it would make a massive difference? From a psychosocial point of view, are there one or two key things that you would love your team to improve on? Well, then put them to the top of the list. So yes, we spend a good bit of time on the physical bit now in pre-season, but put in at least one priority from each of the other three quadrants, and let's build that into what we were doing from a physical point of view. And we'll talk about how you might do that as well. Okay. Oh, the final thing then, how much time per week do I have? So really, really, really important bit that we often miss. You'd love to do 101 things, but what if you only train twice a week for an hour each night? So you've 2 hours. So what is the most important things that you can do in those 2 hours? So that dictates a huge amount. Now, here's some key points about a well-designed pre-season. So a really important aspect is you're ramping up activity to prepare players for in-season. And from an injury prevention point of view and training load, so load is accumulated over session by session by session by session, and that's the physical demands that's placed on a player by doing the running or whatever it is you're asking them to do. So from an injury prevention point of view, what we always want to avoid is massive spikes in training load. So all of a sudden you've been doing nothing, now you do a massive amount, a big hard session, you miss another couple of sessions, you do another massive amount, and so your training load looks like this, big spikes, peaks and troughs. And that's not particularly good from an injury prevention point of view. What we want is a nice steady training load with small peaks and small troughs. Okay, so that's what we're looking for. No big spikes. And that's an important thing when it comes to preseason. Because if you have players that haven't done anything and they've been off, so of course they haven't done anything, and you can't criticize them for that. But what you don't want to do is start too intense, and all of a sudden in 3 or 4 sessions you've got a pulled hamstring, you've got a rolled ankle, you've got people dropping out because they've just lost motivation. So you have to allow people to get used to it and to build back up again. The other important bit is about distinct planning and progression. So if you've got, and we'll talk about the length of it in a couple of minutes, but there should be a sense of progression, that this is going to be a hard session, this is going to be a lighter session. We're going to take this and this is how we're going to make it more difficult over the next couple of sessions. So it shouldn't all be, let's go run at 100 miles an hour and we'll all laugh and joke if somebody gets sick on the sideline. There has to be a little bit more thought put into it. A few more important points. You're definitely going to have ranges of motivation in players. So you're going to have some players who are delighted to get back, some players who are dragging themselves out. It should actually be enjoyable, and where you pitch it is going to be important. You don't want it that it's so hard that people just don't want to come back again. And sometimes when we think about preseason, we want to get people fit and so, let's push and it'll be good for them to work hard, and I agree with all of that. And I agree that in order to get fitter, you have to push yourself into the red zone a little bit. You have to do things that are difficult, but it should be set up in a way where the challenge is manageable. It's really, really important that players feel like, okay, this is difficult, but I can do it. I'm able to do it. Another really important point is weather. So it could be horrible weather, absolutely horrible. You could have really bad conditions underfoot. You could end up in a small patch of a corner of a pitch where the grass isn't too bad. So having a plan for that is important. And going back to that enjoyable point, if it's miserable, cold nights out like we have at the minute, how are you going to set up your session to try and, I suppose, keep players motivated and also keep them warm and keep them moving? How are you going to deal with that? Because it is a challenge. And then also the incorporation of gym-based work. So if you are, especially kind of minor, adult especially, a good pre-season will have some room for gym-based work as well. Now, let's put a little asterisk beside that and say it depends on where you're at. If you're a club and you've never done, you as a football coach have never built in gym-based work into your training so far, well then maybe you don't have to. Maybe the players go off and do it in their own time, and that's just something they do, and you just deal with the football, and that's fine too. But from an injury prevention point of view and a general strength and fitness, the incorporation of some gym-based stuff is important. Again, not just for performance, but also from an injury prevention point of view. So,
Nina, just before we move on there, a question came into the chat from Declan, and he asked, I suppose it was probably in your previous slide, how many under 16 sessions should an under 16 team do a week, and should be based on what other activities the players are doing. So how many under 16 sessions should an under 16 team do, and I suppose should that factor in that players are doing other activities? I don't know, will you answer that later on in the presentation, or do you want to answer it now?
Excuse me. No, I'll answer it now. It's an important question, Declan, and it is there's no right or wrong answer. So I suppose if I was a coach and I'm dealing with an under 16 team, I think if you talk about adult sessions, adult training, most people, the most you're going to train is probably 3 times a week, maybe Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday. So to me, there's your upper limit. If you have players involved in loads of activities, there'd be a question of, well, if you start putting on more training sessions and it's causing tension and none of them are able to go, then is it worth it? Does it just become a negative? I would rather have 1 or 2 really good quality sessions with everybody there than adding in a third where half the people can't show up, and it kind of sucks the positivity out of the team. And it becomes, where is everyone? Oh, she's at soccer and she's at volleyball and she's at whatever. So it depends is the answer. If your players are off playing other sports, then I don't think you can give out to them. I'm not suggesting you would, but we can't give out to them for not being at our sessions. If you have people who are players under 16s who are really interested in it and they have time and they want to do more training, well then there's no harm in putting it on. It's about what the players are happy with and what's productive, because more isn't always better. It's about what's productive and what's appropriate. So the one thing I would say is don't let an extra session become a negative thing for the team and it just causes tension. Less sometimes is more, quality over quantity, I would say. I'm not sure, Will, do you want to add on that, or do you think that answers?
No, Cliona, you're happy to move on?
Okay, lovely. And William, you just jump in with any of the chat questions as they come. Okay, so from a physical standpoint, let's get into a little bit of detail here. So what are you preparing for? What do players need to be? So aerobically fit. The game lasts 60 minutes. So they've got to be able to be on the move for 60 minutes. They've got to be able to last that. That's what the game they're going to play requires of them. Intermittent running. So it's the stop-start nature of it. So they're on, they're off, they're on, they're off. So it's fast, slow, fast, slow. If you look at a GPS from any Gaelic sport, and players could cover it in 7, 8, 9K, depending on the sport, the code. And a lot of that ground is jogging or walking. So they're just moving around. Think of somebody getting back to their position. They've made a run, they're reassessing, they're moving around the pitch. And then they've got these bursts, these high intensity efforts. So that's the type of running that the game requires. Also speed and agility. So fast, they need to be fast. And agility, evasion, stopping, starting again, avoiding players, defensive agility, so defending, moving back, footwork, all of that sort of stuff, that's required. And then strength and power. So strength and power is also required for speed and agility. They absolutely need those characteristics too. And often when we say strength and power, we think of gyms, but we're going to talk a little bit later about what strength and power on the pitch looks like and how you can include that in a pitch-based session. So again, I'm going to give you a couple of seconds to think about this, and we might throw in some answers to the chat. So think about, one, what type of running should we do? So actually, let's use the chat now, and anyone with any thoughts on that, just fire it into the chat. William, you might just shout out what's coming through. So what type of running should we do when we're talking about pre-season?
And while we're waiting for that, Cliona, Dibna had a question. She's not a qualified trainer or anything like that. And would you recommend that a qualified, that, you know, I suppose people who probably don't have the qualifications, should they have a qualified advice on gym and weights to be required? Should they get that advice from someone who's qualified in the area if they're not too comfortable in themselves and giving advice? So while people are putting the stuff into the chat there, could you just answer that for me, Cliona, for Dibna?
Yeah, thanks, Dibna. I think that in any scenario, if you're not sure about something, you should seek advice for sure. I don't think there's any problem in coaches, and there are resources out there from the GAA, and there are resources from Ladies Gaelic Football as well in terms of the type of movements you should do, and the body weight circuits and all of that, so that there's no problem in including that. Where the knowledge can become an issue is if you're going in, you're thinking about, well, now I need to use weights or stuff like that. So as the team progresses and as their training requirements needs more advanced training in a gym environment, yes, I would absolutely get advice there. But in terms of doing body weight circuits on a pitch or in a hall, I think that if there are good GAA and Gaelic Games resources out there that you can look at to be able to do the basics, in my opinion.
Thank you, Cliona. So things that are coming in to answer your question was interval training, interval runs, endurance, speed, repeatability of various distances. Colin says long runs, a slow pace for endurance. Liam said sharp bursts to build endurance. Again, Jerry said any running that includes ball will encourage more effort. We've Mihal come in terms of, that's a question there, so I'll come back to that one, Mihal. Sport, short sprints, angle runs, as well as straight back pedaling runs. You probably should know more. So there are a few that came in there, Cliona, on that question.
Lovely. Okay, so yeah, and again, there's no, basically you can do anything, but it depends on what you want. So I go back to the idea of, if you've only got so much time per week, you've got to use it wisely. So yes, if I go and do 5Ks every week and do slower pace running, will I get aerobically fitter? Absolutely, I will. 100%, no doubt about it. However, that's not the type of running that that happens in a game and happens in a field sport. So we can do intermittent running. So we can do slightly faster running with breaks in between. And I think that's probably the better use of time, especially if you've only got 2 to 3 sessions a week, maybe you've got 2 sessions a week, that type of stuff is a better use of time, because not only are you improving, and we'll talk about specifics of this later, but not only are you improving fitness, because it's not fast enough that it's speed work, but it's not slow enough that it's steady state. It's in the middle. So you're switching on and maybe going about 75-80% of your speed, and then you're off and on and off and on and off. So that might look something like an 80-meter run. You do it, you take a little rest, and then you run back again. You do it, take a little rest, run back again. and that switching on and off. So for me, that intermittent running is a better use of time for the context that we work in. And we will talk in detail more about that. The other thing then, how can I encourage them to run fast? So if we want people to be faster, we've got to get them to run fast. And just let's go 30 seconds, fire stuff into the chat there about if you want to encourage people to run faster, how would you do it in a training session?
I think Michal was asking the questions, what are the best drills to improve speed over short distance? So I presume you're going to answer that very shortly with this one, Cliona.
Yeah.
So reactive sprints, Sean says, make it a relay, says Kira. I like that idea, make it a relay. I'd like to hear your thoughts on that, Cliona. For speed, races, individual and team, long strides, said Corey. Frank Burke said, make it a competition, really. Dolan says, plyometrics. We have introduced the ball, is another one. So there are just a few things that are coming, Cliona.
Yeah, lovely. So, again, all spot on. So if you want to, let's say I am working with an inter-county team, and it's so simple and it works for every age group, and I want them, I always want them to run fast once a week. And when I say fast, I mean 90% above of their max speed. What we have on their GPS is their max speed. I want to hit them to hit 90% or above once a week when we're talking about in season. But how do I elicit that response out of them? So always I make it competitive. So if I'm practicing the technical running mechanics and it's sort of drill based and they practice that and it's not competitive and everyone's sort of going at their own pace and stride it out. But the minute I want them to get right up there to their max speed, I start one person 2 meters ahead of the other person and I say, right, on the go, you're both going, and the second player, you're trying to catch the first player. Simple as. And immediately, all of a sudden, the speeds go through the roof. So, and including the ball, and including reactive thing, anything that's competitive, because that's who they are. They're team sport players who respond to competition and respond to the game. So if you want to work on speed, make it competitive, and they'll run faster. Quite simple. And I'm actually going to skip this next one because we're going to talk about it at the very end. But because there's always a question of, do we need to do gym work? Do we not need to do gym work? And that will always depend on the team and the context and all of that. So I want to talk about what that's going to look like if it's, or how would you address strength and power on the pitch rather than the gym? So I'm going
to. There's something that just to keep in your mind as well throughout the presentation. A question came in there earlier, and this person is coaching men's and ladies teams in Nordic, where I suppose they have two types of environments. They have one that's non-serious environment, so how do you cater for various fitness levels and motivation, and then you have the fun, moderate, more serious group, and how do you set a baseline for them? I suppose the question he's asking is, how do you, just wondering, I suppose, is this something you come across in trying to make the Gaelic games fun and not have sessions too serious for players looking to be involved for socials? I suppose that mixability and mixed motivations, how do we keep everybody involved? And I suppose that's something you'll probably touch on as we go through the presentation, Cliona.
Yeah, we will touch on it here and there. I suppose the key thing is to say that you can't, by setting things up, by being a little bit savvy about how you set things up, who you group with who else can have a massive effect on that. Even letting, so let's say the more advanced players, or the people who take it more, not even more advanced, people who take it more seriously, if you sort of group them together and say, right, in this session we're going to do this, so I want you guys to push each other along and you guys work in the same group, and then the other group who are a little bit more recreational, a little bit more fun, they operate over there. So the other thing to think about, and we're going to talk about including the ball and all of that, is that this should feel like football too. And I'm specifically starting with quite technical things that look like they only fit in the physical box. But what we're going to move on to is how do I achieve these physical targets by using football? So there's definitely a manner where you can just set up your sessions in a logistically to cater for different needs, mostly by grouping people in different areas for specific activities, if that makes sense. Bit waffly, perhaps, that answer. Okay. So next slide. Let me see, sorry. All right, so if we were looking at a 6 weeks of a preseason, often that's what we get, 6 weeks. And I would say week 1 and 2, you're talking about general physical preparation. So you're just trying to get them moving again, back in the habit of training. So if that's 2 to 3 sessions over 2 weeks, you're talking about 6 or 8 hours of training time. So generally speaking, you'll start with a lower intensity and more volume. So the running isn't quite as intense. Yes, it's still intermittent, but it's not let's go full tilt straight away. And the emphasis is more maybe on the physical side of things and skills. So lots of ball work, lots of touches of the football, a bit of running, nice and controlled and manageable. Then when we move into week 3 to 6, that's when you start building up to competitive intensity. You've done your week 1 and 2, so you've got that foundation. Everybody's okay, everyone's loosened out, all the muscle soreness is gone. And now people are ready to start pushing the intensity up. And I think that's the mistake that's often made. We shoot too early in preseason. We think, oh, I've got a great session and I really want, and I've got a really energetic session that I want to deliver, and I've laid out this great new running program and I want to start it now. And we overshoot, and either people lose motivation, it's too hard, or they get injured, or there's nowhere to go. You peak too soon and then you're struggling, and after 4 or 5 weeks, then everybody sort of the air goes out of the tires. And think about that. I've definitely been a player in those pre-seasons, and I've definitely been a coach in those where the first 4 weeks are flying it and there's so much enthusiasm, and then by week 5 and 6 it's like, oh god, not another one, and it's just the same, and it's slog. So just pitching it and starting with something that's manageable is important. And then in that second phase, the 3 to 6, that's when maybe you start introducing more tactical preparation, more challenge matches. You start getting them to think about the game a bit more. So it's becoming more game-like, and as you approach competition time. And there should be a different feel in those two, in my opinion, especially in intensity and also in activity, and the language and the time you're spending on tactical things, and game awareness and stuff like that. Right. So another important piece is minimizing injury risk, because we talked already about going from 0 to 100, and that's bad from an injury point of view. So if you want to minimize injury risk and set your players up for a really good season, 1, complete a proper warm-up, and GA 15, and there's the LGFA warm-up as well. Those resources are there on GA e-learning, and I'm sure William will correct me and give me the specific website, but those resources are there for what type of activity should be in a proper warm-up. Really, really important, especially on cold nights in bad conditions. You want your players nice and warm. Second thing, progressively increasing the intensity of your session, and we're going to talk specifically about intensity in a minute. That's really important. Building up nice and slowly, give people the opportunity to be able to work really hard. Let them build up, and then decide, now we're going to push when you're ready to push. In terms of flat out sprinting, build up over 2 to 3 sessions, I would say, because again, if they haven't sprinted in a long time, and session number 1, you go out and you ask them to go full tilt, not great from a hamstring point of view or an injury prevention point of view. So allow them to get the legs moving again before you go up and say, right, now we're going to run really, really fast. Across the weeks of training, build in highs and lows. Think about motivation again. Think about if it's the same slog every session. Number 1, from a mental point of view, like, oh, here we go again. We're doing the same laps over and over again, or the same drill or the same whatever. And it's just getting harder and sloggier as the weeks go by. So, and even communicate this to the players themselves. Say, right, Tuesday and Thursday, or this week or whatever it is, our sessions are going to be about a 6 out of a 10. So they're going to be hard enough, but not too difficult. But next Tuesday, when we've got 2 sessions on the belt, we're going to go for an 8 out of 10. We're going to really push it on. We're going to have a really energetic session, and let them know which ones are going to be what each week, and let them kind of build a bit of an anticipation, build a bit of an excitement about it, because I guarantee you, if you set the session up like that and everyone comes and trains really well, then after it, there's a big sense of elation. And we did that, and geez, that was tougher, and we're getting fitter, and that I found that bit hard, but it was great. Now I feel great afterwards. So build in a bit of excitement about kind of the working hard, the red sessions. I find that that's really, really positive. Next bit, including controlled and progressive agility in contact. Again, from an injury point of view, if they've been doing nothing, or maybe they have been doing 5, 6Ks or 4Ks or whatever, going for jogs or out on their bike, that's great, and that will help their aerobic fitness for sure. But what they haven't got is stop, start, change of direction, or contact. So allow those first couple of sessions, put them together in a controlled manner. So they practice decelerating, and they practice going for a 50-50 ball. And obviously we're a non-contact, non-deliberate contact sport, but there is some, bumping into people, falling over, rolling over, getting back up, all of that stuff. Start that in a controlled manner. Don't just lash them into it straight away, especially from an injury point of view. Let the knees and the joints and the glutes and the hips and everything get used to that change of direction again. And then last one, including small and big spaces in training. This is important for 2 reasons, because think about the small spaces. What you get in that is you get change of direction, and you get exposure to what we just talked about, and a little bit of contact with players, and it's all a little bit tighter. And then in the big spaces, you get the opportunity to open the legs up and stride out. If you only ever train in a 20 by 20 area, your players will never run fast, or as fast as they possibly can, because there's not enough room. Think about it. Would they get going and all of a sudden they have to stop again? So to develop speed, to develop hamstring conditioning and muscular conditioning for running, you've got to allow them have space enough to open their legs. So training in small and big areas is important. And I have a little note on intensity at the bottom there, and we'll talk about that in a minute. So William, I'll just hand over to you. Any questions?
Just clear it there on that one. I suppose a lot of clubs, we spoke about earlier, in terms of, should clubs from, say, under 14 up probably start doing a similar warm-up to probably build athletic development? What's your thoughts on that? Like, we have the LGFA injury prevention warm-up, there's the GA15 warm-up. What's your advice on that in terms of, I suppose, building a kind of a consistency across the board in how we train or warm up our teams?
I think there's no harm, William, in a club having similar warm-ups through their age groups, and that doesn't mean that it has to be robotic. I think there are principles of what you should include in warm-ups, and it's no harm having so the coaches coming together and saying, okay, are all of us ticking these boxes in our warm-up? For sure, no problem in that, and that creates a bit of collaboration between coaches. What I would say though is a friend of mine, or a colleague of ours, myself and William, has this idea of flow in a session: what you do first, what you do last, and your ups and your wow moment, and basically setting the tone of what you do first and what you do last. And think about it when you get to a pitch, and how are you going to grab their attention? What is the first thing they're going to have to do? If it's the same thing every time, well, then people start arriving late a little bit, and they're trudging through it, and they've done it 100 times, so they're switching off. So is there a way where you can say, this is the bit, this is the non-negotiable bit that we do in our warm-up? Like William said, the LGFA injury prevention warm-up, or the GA15. So we've got to tick all these boxes, but we're going to set that in something that's a little bit more exciting or changeable. So we're going to do it could be a 30-second different activity each the start of each session. Could be something fun, could be something to do with a ball, anything at all. Could be, I don't know, be as creative as you like, but something that kind of sets the tone. Oh God, we're on here. All right, yeah, great, we'll do that. And now we get into our injury prevention or our GA15 warm-up. And I think that's really important, that idea of setting the tone of your warm-up? How do you start your session in order to get everyone tuned in and on board? That answer that, Will?
Yeah, and I suppose you can move on to the next slide. But while you're doing that, I suppose Padraig mentioned the importance of having the LGFA warm-up. And as we know from our coach education perspective, that due to the female biomechanical makeup, I suppose females have wider hips, and also the angle of ligaments to the knee are at a different angle. So therefore, they're probably more prevalent to lower limb injuries. So the importance of warm-ups in ladies football is vitally important, especially those kind of, the squat, the lunge, and then that sort of kind of functional movement as well, Cliona. I just want to, I suppose, reiterate Padraig's point there, really,
Yeah, absolutely. You're spot on, Padraig. Okay. So yeah, we're talking about this highs and lows. So bottom of this graph, you've got, and these are arbitrary, Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, Tuesday. So that is 1, 2, 3 and a bit weeks of a preseason, and intensity then on the way up. So I have just put in those yellow triangles there, as in, okay, the first session, that's what the intensity is. The second session goes up a little bit. Third session goes up a bit. So you see session 5 there, right now we're reaching a peak. We've gone up. We're going to push it out a little bit that Thursday night, make everything a little bit harder, more challenging. Then we're going to drop back down again. We're going to give you a rest when you come down. So what happens then? Let's say you've done that Thursday and it's a peak session. You drop it down a little bit Saturday, you drop it down a little bit Tuesday. Then all of a sudden it feels a bit easier. They're like, oh God, this session isn't too bad. They're walking off, oh God, I had a bit left in the tank there. Maybe I'm getting fitter. I feel good. So you're allowing them to do a slightly easier session because you know what's coming. The Thursday and the Saturday, the 2 red triangles there, you're going to put 2 back to back. You're going to push them on those 2. And my question here is, what would you think would happen on the Tuesday then? That's where I have the question mark. I'm sure you can all see where I'm going with here. You're dropping that down again. That's the first time you've done 2 red sessions. Let's call them red sessions back to back. The first time you've done those 2. So now you need to give them a break, let them drop down again. And that's what your preseason should look like, up and down, not too big a gap between anything. So just gently up, gently down, gently up, gently down. And I guarantee you that changeable nature of the sessions will bring out good stuff from your players. It will increase motivation. It will increase engagement, because there's nothing worse than having to do the same stuff and you know what's coming and it's the same feeling every session. So switching it up is really important. And from a physical development point of view, if you were doing, be it gym work or running or anything like that, if you just do the same thing at the same pitch all the time, you get to a point where you reach a plateau and you're just going to be steady and you're not going to get any better or worse. And in fact, actually, you're more likely to get worse than you're likely to get better. So if you can change the stimulus up and down like this, you're going to elicit a better response from your players, both physically and mentally, in my opinion.
Tina, I suppose some coaches and Jack came in there through the chat, a very good point from Andrew. And I suppose we've got to be recognized, I suppose players play a lot of sports, and maybe they might prioritize other sports over one or the other. But, in preseason, everybody's doing preseason. So I might be doing preseason with football and I could be doing preseason with soccer. So I suppose what would you recommend? I suppose, is it communication between the 2 coaches really to make sure that they're doing quality work with whatever group they are. So it's not a case of they're doing a hard session, say, with Camogie on Tuesday night, they're doing another hard session on Wednesday night with ladies football. How do we manage that and make sure that the quality is kept and that the player is improving or not being overloaded? Is that communication important, do you feel, or have you any other thoughts on that?
The communication is vital, Will, if it happens. Best case scenario, the Gaelic coach would be talking to the soccer coach, who'd be talking to the basketball coach, etc., etc. Obviously, that doesn't always happen. So what works in the real world? And we can be defensive as coaches, and we can say, well, I'm not giving in, and she's going to do the sessions I want her to do, etc., etc. Because you don't want to feel like you're giving in to the other coach or the other code, but that really isn't the best for your players. So if communicating with the other coaches isn't a viable option, well, then it's communicating with your players, or depending on their age, their parents. So if I trained a Monday and a Wednesday with Gaelic, and one of my players trained a Tuesday and a Thursday with soccer. I'd ask them, well, what do you do on a Tuesday and a Thursday? Okay, well, and you do this type of running, and which one is harder? You're saying the Thursday is harder. Okay, well, I tell you what you do. You do the our session on a Monday, and we'll make that, and you really push yourself in that session, okay? And then so you're with us on the Monday night, and you push yourself in that session and work as hard as you can. And the Tuesday, then you go and play your soccer. And the Wednesday, because I know your training on Thursday with soccer is going to be hard, and at the minute I'm not communicating with your manager or your coach. And on the Wednesday, if we need to, we'll turn down your session a little bit. We'll let you go 10 minutes earlier, 20 minutes earlier. You can step out of some things depending on the week, depending on how you feel. So I'm never afraid to modify sessions for players. To me, if they're showing up, they're consistently there. That's the most important thing. And little and often to me is better than heavy all the time. It's for sustainability, for injury prevention, for longevity of career. I think it's more valuable for that communication than feeling, well, I can't give in and I'm not going to let you away with not doing bits of my session. Does that answer that, Will?
Someone in the chat says, I completely agree. So I think you answered it well. And I suppose it's just that communication, really. So look, if one of you, obviously you'd love to talk to the other manager or the other coach. If it doesn't work, then talk to your player. I think that's the key to it, really. You know?
Yeah. Okay. So I've mentioned the word intensity a good few times now. So we're going to talk about what that actually means and how do you progress it. So if I'm telling you it's important across preseason to progress intensity, how do you do that? So here's a couple of different ways. Number one is duration. And this might be out of your control. So you might just get to train for 60 minutes and that's it, because somebody else is coming on the pitch. But you can progress session intensity by just making it longer. And maybe we add, okay, this week we're going to train for 70 minutes. We're going to play our game longer in the middle of the session or whatever that is. So duration is a simple way of increasing intensity or load. The second one is the reps and volume or volume at high intensity. So here's an example one, kick passing drill that includes a 40-meter run. So in session one, you might do 3 sets of 8 runs. And in session 2, you do 4 sets of an 8 and 8 and 8 and a 6. So you add on a set of 6 at the end. So they've done their 3 sets of 8 and you say, do you know what? Now we're going to do a 4th set, but it's only going to be 6. It's less than you usually do. Okay, so the repetitions of that high intensity drill, of that high intensity run, you're just adding on a few more. Second example then is if it's a small sided condition game and you do it by time. So in session 1, 4 sets of 3 minutes, session 2, 4 sets of 4 minutes. So you're still doing the same amount of games at the same number of sets, but you're just adding a minute onto each one. Again, that's an increase, a progression in intensity. Another way, the density of the reps. Same kick passing drill. In session number 1, you're doing 3 sets of 8 runs and you get 2-minute rest between each one. And then the next time you do it, you're only giving them 90 seconds rest. Or another really easy, in session 1, you have 4 at a cone, in session 2, you have 3 at a cone. So the less people at the cone, the more often they have to go, which means the density of the work is more, right? That's another way, increasing intensity. And someone mentioned this earlier on about linear versus change of direction running. So if I'm running up and down in a straight line, there is a certain demand placed on me. By adding in some change of direction work, it's a different type of load, because on the musculoskeletal system, because I've got to stop, I've got to decelerate, I've got to control my body weight, and then I've got to re-accelerate again. So the energetic demands are higher when you're adding in those zigzags, those change of directions. So if everything is linear at the start, then building in more change of direction changes the demands of it and can be more intense. So there's 4 different ways of just conceptualizing what does progressing intensity look like. Okay. Now, this is where we actually get to the practical bit. So that's all well and good, wonderful, yeah, great. But what does it look like on the pitch? So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to just I have a various examples here of drills and activities on the pitch, and we're just going to talk about each one and what it would look like. What do you get out of it from a physical point of view? What are the pros and what are the cons? Okay.
And Cleena, before you go on there, a question came in regarding, you have, when you start off, you have 24 on the first night, and they're all gung ho and geez, massive in motivation. Then geez, the next night you're down to 13, and the night after down to 12, and then all of a sudden a week later they're back up to 24 again. I suppose if you're trying to get consistency in fitness, but your numbers are fluctuating, I don't know. Is that just pure motivation, or what can the coach do really, or just tell them that they're going to do a light session every night? I don't know. What's your thoughts on that one?
Yeah, well, there's not a whole lot you can do. If they don't show up, they don't show up. But I think that's part of that is making it manageable, giving them confidence at the start, because we all have the player. The minute it gets a bit hard, that I have to mind my dog, it's my dog's birthday or something like that, you'll have every excuse under the sun. So often there are people come in and out, but you're trying to keep them motivated by giving them confidence they can do it, by not making it too difficult. And if you have, as we're going to talk about now, if we're progressing this over a couple of weeks, being able to say, God, remember in week number 1 you were doing that and you found it really difficult, and now it's much easier, you're doing it much better. So trying to remember how they're progressing and just reminding them you're getting better. But this is all well and good, but in every GAA club in the country, in ladies football teams, and especially at the start of the year, you're going to have players who drop in and drop out. That's a fact of life. And I just sort of say, when they're there, I make them as welcome as possible and try and if they're behind in their fitness, I try not to make a show of them. I try not to put them in scenarios where they're going to be very exposed. I try and allow them to complete it and feel good about what they've done, rather than being at the session and feel like, oh God, I'm miles behind everybody else, and what's the point in this? So I think if you know someone's in and out and they're coming to the session and you know that they're not at the level that everybody else is at from a fitness point of view, try not expose them. Try and make it easy for them to come back the next day. Because if they get embarrassed and they feel like they're nowhere near anything, it's very easy to lose motivation. Okay. So next batch of stuff. So here's an example of some agility, and I've put in skills because I'm going to ask you about incorporating the ball here. So this is it's an example of how you might progress agility or change of direction. So in drill number 1 here, you see your players moving forward. They've got probably a 45-degree turn around a cone and then a 20-meter run to the red cone at the top. Okay, so that's number 1. So it's straightforward. They know exactly where they're going, and it's all sort of forward facing. In example number 2, the turn gets a little bit tighter. So they run 5 meters, they've got a 90-degree turn, and then they've got their swinging around the outside cone. And then at the red line, they're stopping. So you've got a proper full deceleration and then a re-acceleration forward again. So that one's more difficult because the turns, the turns are harder, and there's a deceleration in the middle. And if you look at the last one, they're out about 10 meters and then they're nearly doing a 180 back on themselves, and then they're nearly doing a 180 again and re-accelerating forward to the final red cone. So that the nature of that turn when they're coming back on themselves is harder on the body. Think about it, you got to plant your foot, get right back to where you came from. So that's a harder turn on the joints and the musculoskeletal system than what we saw in the kind of side step that we saw in the first drill. So even how you lay out the cones, like that can progress the intensity of what you're doing. And then if you look at the top right hand side, so within drills progression. So if I wanted, let's say I picked drill number 1 there and I wanted to progress it without changing the cones. So the first time, it's at your own pace, get around there, just get a feel for it, get used to stopping and twisting and turning or whatever. Then there's competitive races. So you could have 3 of them set up beside each other. On the whistle, go, boom, boom, fast you can. Whoever crosses the line is the winner. Then you can do it with a bit of controlled contact. So you can design it so players go around their cones, but end up kind of coming together and racing to the end. So there's a little bit of, oh, someone's on my shoulder, and now we've got to race and I've got to avoid them. Now I've put skills at the top. So what can you do? How can you incorporate a ball in this? It's quite simple. I'm sure you're shouting it, or you're nodding your head. You either do the drill with the ball, so I'm carrying a ball as I'm doing it, or as I'm doing it, or as I'm coming out the end of it, I'm receiving a ball. So there are definitely ways to do this type of stuff and incorporate football into it. So there we go, back to our 4 quadrants at the start. I can do agility work, change of direction, and technical work at the same time. Killing 2 birds with 1 stone. And also, the other point to make, you can also do speed. So you could have the last cone 5 meters away, or you could have it 20 or 30 meters away. So you could get that really fast competitive run down to the last cone as well. So you can maneuver and manipulate all these to get various different outcomes of them. So that's agility. This thing. Okay, so the next one then. So here's an example of how you might lay that out on a pitch from a bigger point of view. So what happens here? So you see the blue players and the yellow boxes, that just means an agility activity. So they come out of there and they receive a pass. They do their activity, agility activity, and they receive a pass from the red players, 4, 5, and 6. Then, so I'm a blue player. I've come out of my agility drill. I receive a pass, and then I've got to get by the player that's just given me the ball and carry it out past the 45. Then blue players come in turn, become the feeders, and the red players go in and join the queue to do the agility drill. So think about what they're getting here. You're getting intro to contact. So you're getting that first 1v1. I'm coming out of my agility. I collect a ball, and now I've got to go past somebody. Depending on where you put the line that they have to run to, they could be getting a 30, 40 meter run with the ball in hand. Open up the legs, striding out. They're getting skills under fatigue. So as they go through this, they're going to get tired. They've still got to catch the ball. They've still got to get by. They've still got to solo. Think about what you might see. You might see one pace running. So players, they collect the ball, they're getting tired, and they slow down. They're just trotting out to the line. Whereas you're trying to encourage them, come on, push right out to the line there. You might get lackluster tackling. So after the player gives the other player the ball, they're sort of half doing it, and they're, oh yeah, go on, letting her run by her. So again, an opportunity to talk about, even when you're tired, let's see if we can get at least one tackle in here, or at least slow her down. You'll get fumbles and skills errors, and that's all fine. That's all pre-season stuff. So the more time they can have their hands on the ball when they're doing these physical things, the better. There's one example of that. Now I'm going to progress.
Tina, with that one, what I like about that is that, John, we were talking about earlier on about motivation. You speak about giving feedback. Like, you probably see a lot of that in the first week or two, and then you probably see, you know what, the running is not as one pace as it was. It mightn't be as lackluster in terms of the tackling, and the fumblings will actually be less, and the skill errors be less. And that's where you could say to the person, well, 2 weeks ago, remember what it looked like. Look at it now. And is that a great motivation for players going, you know what, we're actually improving here? And they probably don't realize, but you have to outline the evidence that they are improving, and they'll feel it as well.
Absolutely. The key job of a coach, one of the key jobs of a coach is to remind players how they're getting better, in my opinion. So if you're able to say, do you remember when, or even bring, it's so effective, I think, when you bring players back and you kind of make a joke by saying, geez, do you remember the first session we did this? We were brutal. We couldn't do anything. And we were balls flying all over the place and people nearly crawling over the line. Now look at us. Now there's a zip to it and we're flying along. So never be afraid to say, hey, we used to be really bad at this. Now look, we're really good. Because all of a sudden, yeah, geez, we are, and there's a confidence from that, and it's really important. Now we're going to use the same layout for the next bit. So exact same layout, but here we're going to change it a little bit differently. So blue players coming through that orange yellow channel, but this time there's a defender in there. So I've got to get through that channel. I've got the ball. I've got to work my way through, and or do I have the ball, either or, but I've got to get through the channel, okay? So the blue players come out of the channel, and let's say they don't have a ball, okay? So all they've had to do is work their footwork and get by, right? Then they receive a ball from those purple players. So I've come out of that, and now I've got to receive a ball. So here's the question, where does the ball come from? So think about what you could get out of this. If they're far away, you get a kick pass. If they're close in, you get a hand pass. So you can change that from whatever technical thing you want to work on. So I'm the blue player. I've received that ball from wherever it comes from. Now I've got to go as fast as I can out to the 45, as per this diagram. So what you have then is 3 blue players carrying the ball out, or a ball each, out to the 45. So when they get to there, and again, you can change that distance. You could make it 20, you could make it 60 meters, whatever you think. The blue players then turn. One of them has to keep the ball and attack the goal, which is defended by the red players. So then you've got a 3v3 scenario coming into attack. What have you got there? Well, who's got the ball? Who's going to drop? We'll go with my ball. No, we'll go with my ball. So there's going to be confusion there for sure. Then they've got to go on the attack. They're tired. They've just come all the way out. Now they've got to go back in. The red players who are in the channel, they practice their defending. They practice their footwork, and now they've got to turn around and operate as a group of 3 and defend the big goal. So think about what you're getting there. Again, introduction to contact and agility. You're getting those long runs as long as you want. You're getting communication, you're getting gameplay, you're getting skills under fatigue. You're definitely going to create uncertainty. They're definitely going to have to communicate. They're going to be confused. There's going to be terrible decision making. There's going to be fumbles and errors. But again, you're trying to tick numerous boxes at the same time, because if we only have 2 or 3 hours a week with them, it cannot just all be about physical training for preseason, in my opinion. We've got to challenge them to use the brains, especially as they're getting tired.
And as you go on to the next one there, Tina, I suppose that's where you let your players come up with the solutions. Well, guys, this is chaotic. Jesus, gone a bit mad. Go on, have a chat and come back and we'll do it again. I suppose that's building that psychosocial, that groups working together and chatting together and come up with a solution.
Absolutely. So here's another one. So have a look at this now. So this is a sort of a shooting drill. So the ball starts where number 1 is, passing to number 2, who's going to receive. So the yellow boxes mark where you're going to receive the ball. So 1 passes to 2, 2 turns, passes to 3, 3 takes it on the run, gives it to 4, 4 puts it over the bar. Okay. So what are we getting here? You're getting passing to players on the move. Player number 2 has to do a change of direction. They're coming towards the ball, they receive it, then they've got to turn and get out of there. You're getting intermittent running, because you're on and then you're off. You're on and you're off. You're getting accelerations, shooting, communication. Then have a read of how do we adapt this and progress it. So that is a simple pattern I put there. There are 101 things you could do with that to make it harder, to make it easier, to change the dynamic. Think about how you would progress it. So what about in session 1, we did 4 sets of 3 minutes. So I'm going to run this drill for 3 minutes, and I'm going to see how many scores we get, because it ends with player number 4 taking a shot. And I'm going to count how many times we fumble the ball. Session number 2, we can do 4 sets of 3 minutes again, or 5 sets, whatever. But we can always compare. Again, do you remember the first night we did this? I think we only kicked 2 points. Now, when we do it for 3 minutes, we're kicking 12 points. Look at how we're getting better. Everything's getting sharper. The timing of the run is better. Everybody's fitter. A simple thing, but an important bit with drills like this, and something that I used to always forget, is I designed this specifically so the ball starts at the end line. Because what happens, you may only have 5 footballs. So as the ball goes over the bar, it has to get back to group number 1 very quick. If I started that from the other end of the pitch, at some point it's going to go, no balls left, and the drill breaks down. So thinking about how you lay out your drill so that you can keep it running for that period of time, the 3-4 minutes, is really, really important. Because if part of your goal It's pre-season training. You don't want to be standing around the cold talking. You want your drills to move nice and quick and not have to be waiting for footballs. You can build any pattern like that. You can have them kicking off the left, kicking off the right, as many variations and passes as you want. But this type of activity, if you get players to, once they give the pass, finish a run, once you give the pass, finish a run, to me, in many ways, this is more valuable because it includes way more things than just running. So if you can get players to run while trying to do this, I think it's better than running from the blue cone to the red cone in a straight line and we're just running up and down and up and down. I'd rather do it like this. Okay. So a couple of more examples here. The next two are more game-based stuff. So, and just trying to keep things creative, change things for players, make it interesting for them. So here's a game that's involved. I've done it out that it would be a full pitch. It could be smaller. It could be. There's no problem having it smaller. But here's a layout in a full pitch. So how would you run it? 4 teams of 4 to 6 players. 2 teams using those blue squares and 2 teams using the yellow squares. So you've got a 4v4 using yellow squares, let's say, and a 4v4 using the blue squares. So the teams must complete 10 passes, 10 hand passes in the yellow squares. And then once you do that, so if my team has completed 10 passes in the yellow square 1, then we run over and we do it in square 2, and then we run over and we do it in square 3, then we earn the right to go and take a shot. So we go to one of the ends of the pitch and we've got to score a point. Now, what happens with there? So let's say we're in box number 1 and we get our 10 passes, and then we take off and we run over to box number 2 and we get turned over. So then the opposition team, they are trying to do the same thing. So what you will end up happening is players running from box to box, and it's like a little possession game here, and all of a sudden they're tearing off up the other end of the pitch, trying to get in there. And then you've got another group of players doing that in the blue squares. So it's a little bit frantic. You can have groups of players going all over the place. What you will see is some players start falling behind. They can't keep up with the pace. So that will naturally happen. So either, I talk very about not exposing somebody. So either let them sit out and have a rest, or encourage them to push them on, because the clock doesn't start, or the passes don't start until every player is in the box. Okay, so that's a judgment call if people are falling way behind. You'll also see some players taking charge and deciding, well, let's go to this box. No, we got that already. So some will be very good communicators while this is happening. I would play for a set period of time. So in session 1, okay, we're just doing 2 sets. We're going to go for 5 minutes. And maybe, I've done this exercise before, maybe you only get one score. Maybe you get no score. And again, the next session you do it, or the next session you do it. Now we're getting 2 scores. Now, so you can see progress. This is also an example of setting up a drill that goes from small areas, contact, loads of change of direction. All of a sudden, whoa, I've got to make a 60-meter run. And then I'm back in a small area again, whoa, 60-meter run. So quick alternating, quick decision-making in this one.
Before you go into the last few slides there, Cliona, do you know, I suppose what I'm learning here tonight is that the importance of having that time element so that they don't run on. So that's very important for your intensity. Right, guys, we're going to work here for 5 minutes. And I suppose just from a mental point of view, they're kind of thinking, right, okay, we have 5 minutes, you know, we're going to put in a good effort here. So that you're very, I suppose, and it's only 2 sets. So therefore, will the effort be higher as a result? They know the time and they know how many sets they're doing.
I think it makes a massive difference for them. And I think there's nothing as powerful as when you say, okay, it's only 5 minutes. Okay, it's only 5 minutes. Now, by the way, this game is bloody hard, and 5 minutes of this is very difficult. But also, as it's going along, the player that's getting tired. Okay, there's only 2 minutes left. There's only 2 minutes. So 2 minutes doesn't seem like that long. If we think of our game as 60 minutes, so we're trying to make it bite-sized and make it manageable. I would rather 5 minutes of high quality focused work than 10 or 12 minutes of lackluster switching in and out of the thing. This game, everybody has to be engaged because the group has to work together. So I think time is really, really important, and sticking to it is really important. Okay, next one. So this is my last one in terms of games. So This is, I actually really like these types of layouts because it becomes very, very energetic, and it can be manipulated based on numbers. So these are all little games. So as you see on the left-hand side of your screen, you've got it's 3 2v2s and a 6v6. And that's zone 1A and B. And then in zone 2, you've got a 12v12. So if you have 24, 30, 35 players at training, you can design this where you have a zone 1A and B and a zone 2 running simultaneously, and then they switch over. Or you can say, we're all going to operate in zone 1A and B, and then we're all going to move up to zone 2. That depends on numbers. And these could be 1v1s or 3v3s or whatever way you want to set it up. Time, again, is very important. So imagine now you have all of these zones working. So you blow the whistle, and in zone 1A, in the 2v2s, people are working for a 60-second bouts, and then they get 30 seconds rest. And in the 6v6s, they work for 2.5 minutes, and then they get 30 seconds rest. And up in zone 2 in the 12v12, they're working for 6 minutes. It also allows you to involve loads of different coaches. So imagine that someone's, right, clock is starting, someone's looking after the 2v2, someone's looking after the 6v6, someone's looking after the 12v12. And that is all, and that's all happening together. So great energy and atmosphere on the pitch. And what are we getting here? You're getting changes of spaces. So you're going from small areas to big areas. You get tackling, communication, gameplay, all of that. What might you see? You might see players, there's no hiding in a 2v2. You've got to work. Then when you get up to the 12v12 with the big game, all of a sudden you see people opting out. Oh God, this is very, very difficult. And they kind of hide. And that's why having small and big is important. You have lack of communication, confusion, who's marking who, we're so tired, all of this, trouble decision-making, fumble skills and errors. So all of that is important. It's important to draw all of that out in preseason, because if you're doing a lot of running with very little ball, the minute you add in the ball, it complicates things. So the more opportunity you play with the ball, the better. And this is just, to be honest, arbitrary numbers. They can be designed any way you like. So you do a section of it, blow the whistle, okay, everybody change over, and we go again. I find that very effective.
That's a very good one, Kleena. And Joe, say if you had even 2, 4, 6, 8, 10 players, Joe, just looking here now, like, okay, so zone 1A, you could say, right, you have 10 players, right? For the first, say, 40 seconds, you're all working on 2v2, 2v2, and say you have 2 red bibs and 2 blue bibs in each one. Then when you blow the whistle, they go straight into 6v6. So they kind of have to go from a 2v2 to a 6v6 straight away. And then after another, say, 40 seconds, they go, right, guys, now you're 12v12 or whatever it may be. Do you know? So you're going from working 2v2, then you're with your teammates on a 6v6. So you can really manipulate all these things really to kind of, you know, test the players in different small to bigger size games. I love that concept, Kleena. I think that's a very good concept, actually.
Yeah, and it works really well, and it encourages a lot of communication. Or imagine you have imagine you have 20 players, and you have a 10v10 area set out in the middle of the pitch, and around that you have a load of small 1v1s or 2v2s. So we're out in our 2v2s, our small bits, and we're all out kind of on the perimeter of the big pitch, and we're there we're practicing, we're going like 30-second bouts. Whistle blows, one long whistle blows, and everybody's into the main area straight away, and we're playing a big game. So you're going from a tiny area into a big one. Oh, who's marking who? Who's doing what? Where's the ball? Great confusion. Sure, great, wonderful. The more problem solving they have to do, the more confusion we create sometimes, the better. And just sit back and watch and let it happen, and see who takes control and see who opts out and tries to hide when you get into the big areas. Any questions there, Will, that we should answer on the chat?
I suppose I know you've only just to time in there, like, so we've about 2 or 3 slides left. So if any questions, just put them into the chat now, guys, as Kleena's going to be wrapping up the session now with the final few slides. So if you have any questions, put them into the chat, and I'll pose them to Kleena in a few minutes. Thank you.
Thanks, Will. All right, so I'm trying to pull this all together from you now. So when you are talking about when you're planning a session, think of these things. Have I allowed enough time for a proper warm-up? Can they get their hands on the ball in a warm-up? In every section, can they get their hands on the ball? What element is going to make them laugh? What bit? It's yes, it's preseason, but what bit are they going to enjoy? where am I in terms of progressing intensity? So earlier on we had the highs and lows. So what was my last session like? What's my next session like? What day is the week? Is this the day that all the soccer players come and they're wreck tired? So where should I pitch this session in comparison to the others? At what point do they have to communicate with each other? How can I practice skill execution, game plans at the same time, small, big areas, controlled agility? Are they playing the game of football? How far away am I from it? That's a key question. If it's all running and no football, I think you should move it a little bit closer. At some point in every session, there should be something that looks like the game of football, or close enough to it, in my opinion. So, strength and power. So this is our last big section, and it's quite straightforward, really. So, strength and power and gym work. So under 14 or below, it can definitely be done on the pitch. It's all about functional movements and squatting and lunging and body weight and all of that stuff. So it can definitely be done as circuits on the pitch as part of your session. Under 16 to 18, yes, it can be done on the pitch. Is it appropriate for that sort of age group to be moving into a gym environment and learning and being educated about a gym? Yeah, it is. Would it be appropriate to do circuits in a hall with maybe resistant bands or holy medicine balls? Yes, it would. My question to you is, do you want to use your time in the gym? If you've got a set amount of time with your team, is going in and doing stuff like that in a hall the best use of time? If the weather is woeful, maybe it is a really good thing to do some indoor sessions with some skills and some circuits. And I know definitely the LGFA have some resources around that. For adults, generally speaking, in my opinion, pre-season you're looking at general strength. You're looking at lower body stuff, lunges, single leg RDLs, upper body push-ups, pull-ups, core work, basic plyometrics, jumping and landing skills. So just general full body preparation. Can that be done on the pitch? Yeah, we'll talk about that now in a minute. And if you're in a hall environment or you've got light dumbbells or medicine balls, you're talking about 3 to 4 sets of 8 to 12 reps of exercises. That's sort of the general go-to if you want some general physical preparation. But depending on the level your squad are at, it may be a case where you need external advice on what's what in terms of that. But adult, it's definitely appropriate that it happens. And 16 to minor, it's the time where it's the time where you think about, okay, should we incorporate it? Is it realistic that we can? And what's the best way to do that? But I want to also talk about what that looks like on the pitch. So if you're on a pitch, body weights, and you're doing body weight circuits, so you can do a lunge with weights in your hands, but you can also do a lunge on the pitch with no weights. And you can increase the intensity by either doing slower reps, so do them nice and controlled and slow, or at the other end of the spectrum, try and do loads of reps. Okay, so you could say, all right, I want you to do 10 slow reps, or it's body weight and we're going to go for 20 seconds and I want to see how many you can get done in 20 seconds. So you can go either end there. From a strength and power point of view as well, jumping is a power exercise. So counter movement jumps, broad jumps, multi-directional jumps. So any type of jumping and landing, not only does it help build strength and power, but the skill of landing is really important too. Somebody alluded at the very start. It's really important in terms of injury prevention. From a lower limb injury prevention point of view, having stable, strong landings is important. So even Google broad jumps or multi-directional jumps and get up. You'll see videos on YouTube, and you'll get ideas of different fun exercises that you can incorporate in warm-up and at the end of the session. For running as well, acceleration and sprinting, that all requires power. So if you're getting people to practice 5 meter acceleration, that requires them to move their body, whether it's 60 kg or whatever weight they are, 70 kg, they've got to move that from standing start as fast as they can over 5 meters. So that requires a bit of power as well. So there's loads of stuff you can do on a pitch that addresses that strength, that sort of strength and power work as well. not only in the gym. So here's my last slide of the evening. A little bit of advice for your first 6 sessions. So your first 2 to 3 weeks of preseason. So number 1, be patient and don't take the good out of being back on the pitch. And that goes for coaches and players. Don't take it too seriously. Set a good, strong tone, but just enjoy being back. And also that goes for players too. So if there's one player that, there's often one that is uptight and giving out and come on, let's do this and let's do that and kind of moan. Make sure that it's enjoyable and make sure that everybody is enjoying being there. Definitely do a proper warm-up. I'm going to be harsh on this one and say if you're not leaving time for a proper warm-up, it's problematic. Start with something that is manageable and build forward. So that's good from a physical and mental point of view. Don't start with something that's going to scare everybody off. You're only at the start of the session. Pick a few activities, 2 or 3 of them, and plan how you'll progress them over 6 sessions. So you'll get a handle on how intensity can progress, and you'll see how players can improve and will improve, and you'll see evidence of improvement. As we've said before, you couldn't do this on week number 1, or when we did this on week number 1, we only got 2 scores. Now look at us, we're getting 10. So pick something that you're going to progress over the first couple of weeks. I've said already, using small and big spaces, including the ball, that controlled agility. So those around the cones, design them and be as creative as you want with those agility drills. The tempo of the session may go up and down, but keep the players on the move for as much as possible. So if you're training for 60 minutes and it's pre-season, one of my goals would be, I want to stop this session only to get a little bit of water, have a quick chat. So if I can keep them active maybe 50 minutes out of the 60, then happy days. Then that's also working on your aerobic fitness. If you're standing around for 20 of those 60 minutes, that's lost time and lost fitness minutes. So the more well planned it is and the more you can keep them on the move, the better. And Sinead.
Yeah, and thank you very much, Keena. Just a question there from Dervla. She said, when you're setting up teams 2v2, 4v4, 6v6, do you think it's best to separate the stronger, weaker players and play them off each other in their own ability? Or is it better to mix them all up through the ability in the squad? So, should you kind of, I suppose, pair players according to their ability? Would that come into your planning, I suppose, really, Keena? Would that be...
Yeah, it would be. And you'll often find that the players will sort of self-select. You'll see some of the, let's call them the weaker players, will sort of move away from the stronger players because they don't want to have to go in the 2v2 square with them. But I think it isn't ideal. I talked earlier about not exposing people. So if I'm doing a 1v1 or a 2v2 and I've got the best 2 players against the weakest 2 players, sure, it's not going to work. Now, if I had the best and the weakest against the other best and weakest, that might be better, because you don't want the weakest players to always be down and playing together. There has to be some crossover there. But also what you can do is, if you're in the 2v2s, once they go into the 6v6s, let's say, they're playing on the same team. So you're trying to, I think it's a good point. I would try and avoid the best versus the worst in a head-to-head, because there's only one winner there, and then you're exposing somebody. But I would say if you can balance it, it's better off, because also getting your best player to have to work with the weaker player is important for them too, to learn how to, okay, well, I just can't do it myself. I have to pass through it. I have to encourage her. I have to work with it and not lose patience. That's important as well.
Another question came in there. 2 questions I'll post you, Keena. One here, Patrick was saying in the agility and skills section, Keena, you mentioned about the importance of working on players' footwork. And I suppose you just kind of, how would you introduce footwork skills, I suppose, to work on your footwork? And the other thing was AstroTurf, Keena. Any advice on training on AstroTurf, or what are some considerations you should take into account?
So the first one, footwork and agility. I think like there are technical models of footwork and how you should do a 45-degree turn, how you should do a 180. There's all of that. So it's a big area to try and describe over Zoom. But what I would say is simple things like tight turns. So we've all seen the players that turn like buses, you know, and you want them to try and develop the players who can decelerate better. Are often the ones who can get out of a tighter turn because they can stop and drive back the way they came. So sometimes what I do is I look at the stud marks on the ground and I see, okay, look at the big wide turn they're taking here, and I'll put little cones out and I'll say try and turn inside those cones. Or sometimes I stand there myself, so they're coming around a blue cone and I'm saying, try and get inside me. Now watch out because the ground is slippy. I've been taken out of it once or twice in this one. So definitely keep your wits about you on that. But trying to kind of put a constraint that they have to turn tighter, that's important. The second thing then that I would always cue is when you're coming out of the turn, once you've made the turn and you know which way you're going, put the foot down, hit the gas, accelerate again. And again, that encourages them to pick up the pace and drive out of the turn. Coaching the technical model of turning probably is a bit beyond the scope of tonight and would take me another hour and a half, I'd say. What was the other one, AstroTurf?
Yeah, so just there, and
Yeah.
probably another question to finish up then on Kleena is, like, I suppose, AstroTurf, any considerations or advice in that area?
Yeah.
And the other thing from just one or two is like, motivating underage players, I suppose, you know, throughout the year and talking about opposition all the time and all about championships. Does that actually work? Says Frank. And another one there came in. Is it possible to do a presentation on what a mid-season training session could consist of? Yeah, so I think, yeah, definitely. Thank you very much for that advice. We'll look at that throughout the year. We're always looking for advice and thoughts. So any advice or thoughts on what other webinars we can do, please just email myself, william.harmon@lgfa.ie. I'd love to hear your thoughts, and we'd always be open to new ideas. So last two questions, Kleena, to you.
AstroTurf. Yeah, the AstroTurf.
Considerations and talking about championships all the time in the opposition. That really motivate people, from Frank, and we leave it on that one.
Well, I'll take the first one. AstroTurf can be a challenging one, and there's a lot of differences in surface quality. I know sometimes AstroTurfs that would have been put in 10, 12 years ago have now lost a bit of their bounce, so they can be quite hard. I often find that sometimes doing kind of hard running sessions on AstroTurf, it can get sore on the knees and the hips. It can take a good bit out of people. So it depends on your session, and it depends on if the players are used to it. They say that switching between surfaces within session isn't a good idea, that it should be just the one surface. So sometimes they, we'll do this on the grass, unless it's your light warm up or something, and then you're going on to the AstroTurf. But if you were doing a lot of stuff out in the grass, running maybe, and then you're in on the AstroTurf, sometimes the change of surface isn't great. I've also seen players who prefer to wear runners on AstroTurf. It really depends on the surface. If you have a lot of players who are coming back and saying they're struggling with it, well then I'd heed them. But sometimes there's nothing you can do, where if we're in the depths of winter and there's nowhere else to train, you kind of have to make the most of it. But I would listen to players if they're saying they find it difficult, especially if the surface is an older one. A lot of clubs, I think now, some of their AstroTurfs are coming to the end of their lifespan from a bounce point of view. What was the other question, Will?
And quickly, just on the one about talk about the opposition championships all the time. Does it really motivate players, or should we just focus on ourselves and look to probably improve ourselves all the time and see where that takes us? And we'll wrap it up on that one, Kleena.
Yeah. Listen, sport is competitive, and there's no point in saying it isn't. And you're going to have people who are mad competitive and mad into winning championships, and maybe your team is coming along and they've been pipped by their next door neighbours the last 2 years and they really want to beat them, and not being allowed to talk about that is probably not realistic either. But it shouldn't be the focus. That shouldn't be your purpose. Your purpose for playing the game shouldn't be only to beat the next door neighbour. I think the more important skill for the player to learn, and the more sustainable and motivational tool, is that idea of self-progression, that you couldn't do this last year and now you can. We used to be able to do this and now we can. Look at it. Geez, remember when we had 10 at training, we now have 22. and focusing on what's happening in your environment, I think is more sustainable. I think in doubt, listen, we've all sat in GAA changing rooms in January, and we're going to do this and we're going to do that and we're going to do that. And it all starts with a big bang. And as I said at the very start, 4 weeks later, you're looking at yourself and your dog and 2 players and you're wondering where it all went wrong. And I think too much enthusiasm or too many early promises sometimes can bite you in the backside. I would keep it manageable, and as it goes, put on another layer, make it, add in a new trick, add in and get a guest coach, but for those first few weeks, just make it manageable and enjoyable and get everyone back together, and hold some good tricks in the back pocket for later in the season.
Yeah,
Don't
that's a
promise
good
the sun too early.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to finish, Keena. I suppose it's just, I think hoping, probably overthinking it and probably promising too much, just go week by week and, focus on the next session and focus on the next game and enjoy it. And, always keep those little tricks in your back pocket and bring them out in it, unexpected time. And then that'll just remotivate people. And I just keep it that simplistic. So, Keena, on that note, I just want to say thank you very much for your input tonight. I really enjoyed tonight. I've actually learned a few new drills myself for the coming weeks as well. We want to wish everybody, we hope everybody enjoyed the webinar tonight. It's going to be, the webinar is recorded and it's going to be on our YouTube channel tomorrow. So please, if you want to share it with your coaches, please do. As I said, there's up and coming webinars over the coming weeks after Christmas. So we're looking forward to delivering them. We're hoping you're enjoying the webinar so far. Look, we want to wish you all a safe and a happy Christmas over the coming weeks, and we look forward to seeing you after Christmas again. As I said, there's other webinars going on. We've our volunteer webinars, we've our referee webinars going on over the coming days and over weeks as well, so watch out for them. But on that note, on behalf of myself and Keena, thank you very much for your time, and a very happy Christmas.
Thanks very much. Happy Christmas.